My name is Morgan and I'm trying my best. I wanted to talk today about emotional support animals, especially because we've all heard the stereotypes of someone who insists that their dog is an emotional support animal, therefore they should be allowed to bring them into the store or into the restaurant or wherever dogs typically aren't allowed. And that gives emotional support animals a bad name and also misrepresents how my experience personally has been, as well as I think the intended use of an emotional support animal. I wanted to go in depth into my experience with how I got my emotional support animal, why I got an emotional support animal, and obviously I just would love an excuse to talk about my dog. Join me, won't you? My dog is, well, my dog is asleep right now, so she's not going to be part of this video, but I'm going to include lots of B-roll. Don't worry. Gemma is a Yorkie mix, as far as I can tell. Wasn't really sure. I adopted her from a shelter and she was never specifically trained as an emotional support animal. And I wanted to make the distinction between an emotional support animal and a service animal. Service dogs are specifically trained to perform tasks that their owners require of them. Those tasks will vary quite a bit. Emotional support animals generally don't have any specific training. I've seen, of course, videos of dogs that are trained to recognize panic attacks, and I would put those more in the category of a service animal because they are there to perform a particular task. Gemma was never trained to do any specific tasks. She's not actually particularly cuddly, and when I cry, she'll hang out with me, but I am the one who has to pick her up and get her to cuddle with me if I need that sort of comfort. In my experience with Gemma, her role as an emotional support animal has been more about the act of owning a dog than what things that she specifically does for me. That's a big misconception when it comes to emotional support animals. I wanted to include a disclaimer right away. I am not a medical professional or a mental health professional. I am merely talking from my own experience with an emotional support animal. Your experience may vary based on the state that you're in, what kind of therapist that you have, your mental health diagnosis, as well as your life in general. Just like owning a pet isn't for everyone, owning an emotional support animal isn't for everyone either. That's my disclaimer. An emotional support animal is an animal where the intention is that owning it will improve your mental health. One of the things, and we'll get into this later, it's very hard to research emotional support animals and they don't get the same special privileges that service animals do. If you are going to a place that doesn't allow dogs, you are not going to be able to bring your dog in there. I have a couple of times brought my dog places where they didn't explicitly allow dogs because I asked nicely. It wasn't a matter of me needing her there. It was, I'm walking my dog and I want to stop at Starbucks, and so I brought my dog into Starbucks. What having a pet that's classified as an emotional support animal will allow you to do, however, is to live in a place that doesn't necessarily allow pets and have that pet. My first year with Gemma, I lived in an apartment that was dog free, and then turns out 3 people on my floor had dogs. It was wonderful. I was the first. I started that trend. I'm so happy. The second apartment that I lived in was an apartment that allowed dogs but normally charged rent for dogs. And in Wisconsin, having an emotional support animal meant that I did not have to pay the specifically dog-related fees that I would otherwise as a renter at that apartment building. The ability to own a dog in a dog-free apartment was definitely one of the biggest things that had me investigating emotional support animals, and that was definitely a benefit of having her classified as an emotional support animal, but she definitely serves other purposes, and I wanted to talk a lot about those. When I got Gemma, I was about a month into grad school. I was already overwhelmed. I was living in my own apartment. I had recently had a medical thing happen where I had to drive myself to the emergency room at 2 in the morning after staying up feeling like I needed to puke the whole night. And I worked from home, which meant that the only time I spoke to people was when I was going to classes. I was also in a new city, by the way, just to add more to this sandwich of anxiety. Oh, and I had recently injured myself, so I wasn't able to do the traditional workouts that I've been used to. It was a lot, okay? It was a lot. Was working with my therapist, and I wanted to look into getting an emotional support animal. My therapist had diagnosed me officially with depression, which is something that I had been dealing with for a while, but I hadn't been officially diagnosed with. One thing that I experienced a lot when I was living alone was fixating on my anxieties, which resulted in a lot of negative self-talk and hopelessness and stuff like that. So I was hoping that getting an emotional support animal would result in distracting me from that and allowing me to focus on other things and break me out of that cycle. So my therapist wrote me a letter that allowed me to get an emotional support animal, and I have a non-zero amount of sensitivity to pet dander, so I knew I needed to get a specific breed or mix of breeds in a dog. First, I was considering getting a puppy, and I think you know why. Puppies are adorable. I was considering getting a lab mix, and she was about 6 months old. She was very cute, very sweet. The problem being she was very high energy. She wasn't hypoallergenic. And again, this is just my experience dealing with my sensitivities. When I was looking for a dog, and when I first informed my management that I was getting a dog, they did want to know what breed of dog that I was getting and what age. And I don't think that they could have stopped me from getting a puppy or getting a bigger dog or getting a pit bull, which in Madison I found that there were a lot of apartments that didn't allow renters with pit bulls, even if they were pet friendly. I don't know if they could have prevented me from doing that, but they did want to know, and I was very open with them. I communicated with them. I'm thinking about getting this puppy, but I'm looking around still. What I had started doing a while ago was, when I was on breaks at work, just going to adoption websites and just searching for hypoallergenic dogs. I was looking for a smaller dog, and the smaller poodle mixes just aren't for me. So I was looking at like Maltese mixes and Yorkie mixes, and Gemma came up. She was hairy, and her hair was very long. I fell in love with her. I drove 45 minutes from Madison to a place called Janesville, which is home of the Humane Society of Southern Wisconsin. I stopped in and I wanted to meet Gemma, and she was kind of perfect. She was a little bit anxious. She was constantly looking out the window at other people and barking at the cats, but every time I pet her, she would come back to my hand and want me to pet her more if I stopped. And that's when I knew this was my dog. At the time that I adopted her, Gemma was the only dog in that shelter. Every other dog had gotten adopted. And the reason that she hadn't been adopted yet, in spite of her being cute and in spite of being adorable and available, was she had come to the shelter with heartworms, and she had to go through a heartworm treatment. So she had to be sedated for about a month. By sedated, I mean she took pills that kept her calm for a lot of the time, and she just laid in her kennel. I think a lot of people were worried that Gemma wasn't cured entirely from her heartworms, or that the heartworm treatment had caused irreparable damage to her heart, and so they didn't want to put themselves in a position to be taking care of her and then lose her suddenly. Oh gosh, I'm crying again. I understood that risk. I don't think I fully internalized it, first of all, but also I was willing to undergo it, especially since the shelter had already taken care of all of the vet bills that had been related to the treatment. The only things that I would need to do are take her in for occasional heartworm tests to make sure that she's still heartworm free. And that's how I got Gemma. Adapting to living with Gemma was a little bit difficult at first, especially because I was living alone. So training her on things like potty training, where I couldn't be at my apartment the whole time, was really difficult. I remember getting a note on my door informing me that my dog had been barking very loudly when I was gone, and maybe I should work on that. It's just like, thanks, I super appreciate it. Having a pet doesn't automatically mean it's going to make your life better, and whatever pet that you get might not end up being an ideal service animal, where they are smart and easily trained and cuddly and they want to do anything that you ask them to. Gemma is definitely not that. She is a ball of sass and independence, and I wouldn't have her any other way. And getting a dog is a huge adjustment for both the dog and you. Gemma has a very spunky, playful personality, but I didn't really start experiencing that until after about a year of having her. Before that, she was pretty withdrawn, didn't really play with toys. Fortunately, my parents got a puppy last year, and by introducing her to the puppy, I think we saw her learn how to play more, and now she loves playing. In terms of emotional support, having a dog to take care of was very helpful in making sure that I had established a routine that I could stick to, caring for her and working around her in my day-to-day life, as well as getting me out of the house for walks, especially because Gemma needed to be walked relatively frequently. I can fairly consistently rely on Gemma to make me laugh and to make me smile. It just took a while because I had to also learn about her personality and learn to appreciate her quirks. That all comes from me learning to live with her and learning to appreciate her rather than training her a specific way. When I was planning this video, I decided to do some research on emotional support animals so that I could get maybe more information on their use clinically. But the first page of results when I searched for emotional support animals were all websites that were offering you certifications to have an emotional support animal, where those websites employ mental health professionals like therapists or psychiatrists that are licensed to work in your state and that can give you a diagnosis and write you a prescription for an emotional support animal. I think that it's important for people to be able to have access to an emotional support animal if it will truly help them. But I also think that a large part of why Gemma helped me so much is because I was also working with a therapist while I had her, and I was able to go to my therapist and say, I'm frustrated. That was really helpful. Otherwise, the act of owning a dog would have been overwhelming for me, I think, because it was kind of stressful having a dog that wasn't perfectly trained or that I hadn't lived with for my entire life like I had with my family pets. It was stressful working around Gemma in a way that I hadn't needed to when I lived with my parents and we had dogs, because there was usually somebody home because there was 4 of us in the family. Now that you know about my experiences with Gemma and where I'm coming from in terms of talking about emotional support animals, I wanted to talk to you about a completely unbiased list of pros and cons. Having an emotional support animal can be really wonderful. Having an emotional support animal allows you to own a pet in more situations than you might otherwise have access to. Emotional support animals are also great tools for addressing mental health. As I said with my experience with Gemma, she allowed me to think a lot more outside of my own anxieties. Having an emotional support animal for me was certainly a net positive in my life. However, there are some cons as well. Having an emotional support animal comes with all of the responsibilities that having a regular pet does. On top of all of this, if you are looking into getting an emotional support animal, you might have a condition like depression or anxiety that makes it hard to care for something else. In my case, having to care for another living being helped me, but in your case, it might be different, and that's where your therapist comes in. Emotional support animals are one of a number of tools that can help you with your mental health. However, it might not be the right tool for you based on your specific situation. Some of the things I've learned while owning an emotional support animal are that one of the major things that I needed to do was appreciate Gemma for who she is and not expect her to be the perfect dog. When I got her, I was so excited. We were going to go to dog parks together, and we were going to do agility training together, and I was going to take her to hospitals as a comfort animal for people in hospitals. Some of that won't be happening. Some of that will never happen for one reason or another. Gemma has an injured leg, so agility really isn't her strong suit. She is very cautious and afraid of other dogs, so going to dog parks is not something that we do. Stuff like that. It's just not necessarily exactly everything that I was expecting. However, doing stuff with Gemma isn't the whole story. A lot of it is just thinking about her and appreciating joy she's added to my life. And it's like having a human that you love where you're just grateful for their company. They don't need to do anything. Just the fact that they're around is wonderful. There are a couple of things that I wish I knew going into getting an emotional support animal. One of them is how stressed out I got that Gemma wasn't very easy to potty train. Gemma would have an accident in my apartment every time that I left. It didn't matter how long I was gone. It didn't matter that I had taken her for a long walk before I left. It didn't matter that she really didn't have anything left in her to have an accident with. She just would have an accident and I would have to clean it up when I got back. And sometimes it was really messy and sometimes it was overwhelming, and I'm really grateful to the people who listened to me when I was just really upset that she had done it again and reminded me how much I loved her. But I wasn't expecting that amount of stress, so I wish that I had gotten a dog. No, I don't wish that I had gotten another dog other than Gemma, but if I were to do it again, I would look for a dog who maybe had lived with a foster family for a while and they knew it was potty trained and crate trained, because that would have saved me the stress of dealing with a dog who wasn't, because honestly, I had never done that before. Our dogs were always pretty good about that stuff. Another thing that I wish I knew going into getting an emotional support animal was that my attitude mattered so much more than any of Gemma's personality traits. It was only after I started really approaching all of my interactions with Gemma with gratitude and with appreciation did it help beyond just getting me out of the house. I'm really excited to film the B-roll for this. Gemma is adorable and I'm excited to show her off. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I can answer them in the comments while being aware that I'm not a mental health professional and I can only share about my experiences. If this video helped you in any way, whether it was deciding to get an emotional support animal or deciding against it, actually. If you love dogs, if you loved all of the clips of Gemma that I included in here, please give the video a thumbs up. If this is the first time that you're watching my channel, welcome. My name is Morgan. I'm fairly new to YouTube, but I plan on talking about fitness and mental health and basically my experiences. I really appreciate you watching. Until next time, my name is Morgan and I'm trying my best. Good job, Morgan.